The Memphis Grizzlies had a very impressive performance against the Orlando Magic, one that you should be very excited about for a variety of reasons that we're going to talk about on this episode. But the thing you should be most excited about, look at the two screens here. Look at that. You're going to hear two voices. There's going to be Damichael Cole over there. If you listen to the podcast, if you're on YouTube, you're already stoked. It's going to be a great episode. Damichael and I are back together, and we have a great Grizzlies win, plus some All-Star voting to talk about on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates that you are in search of, that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. You can find us, like, comment, subscribe over on YouTube, and you can also find us wherever you get podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, literally anywhere. We are everywhere. Thank you for making us a part of your Memphis Grizzlies experience. And look who decided to join me for this episode of
We are here, Joe.
And I guess it's, in fairness, I decided to join you. I know you flew solo most recently. So our schedules have been crossed for a variety of reasons that we don't need to go into on this podcast because nobody cares. But Damichael, it's wonderful to see you again, the beat writer on the Memphis Grizzlies for the commercial appeal there in Memphis. You look very nice. I like your hoodie. Maybe an ode to Ja Morant there. I know it's not exactly the same kind of hoodie that he rocks, but it's good to see you, my friend. How are you?
It's great to see you too, Joe. I'm great. It's a good day. We're back together. Like I said,
it's always a good day.
It's always good when we're back together. And of course, another day, another Nike hoodie on my part, and I like to throw in some of those tri-face hoodies and jackets in there too. But I wear a lot of Nike because Nike's kind of a hub in Memphis, so it's kind of different now where you have a player who's about to have his own like apparel and logo.
Absolutely.
In Memphis as part of the Nike hub, which is something, we probably couldn't have imagined once upon a time. But that's so said player, Ja Morant, another big game for him and one of his teammates as well.
And if Grizzlies fans, and I mentioned this on the Locked On Now that I do for us after every game in general, if Grizzlies fans are a little more excited about this one than they probably should be after beating the Orlando Magic, who they should be beating, right? The last time I was on, I talked about professional wins and, the Charlotte Hornets and now the Orlando Magic, a back-to-back of professional wins. They were supposed to beat these two teams, and they did so in convincing fashion. The most exciting thing about it was you saw for the first time ever, literally ever, Damichael, Ja and Jaren Jackson Jr. both score more than 30 points.
Wow.
And the fact that that's the first time ever is surprising to an extent because they've played a lot of basketball together. Obviously, the whole time Ja has been in Memphis, so has Jaren Jackson Jr. There's been some injuries and things of that nature. But the fact that this is the first time that they both have gone for more than 30 points. Somewhere, somebody bet some money on that and made a lot of cash, so good for them. Shout out to them, whoever they are. But I think that the big thing for Grizzlies fans is it was a sign of what is possible when those two guys are offensively clicking, because we know that Ja is the straw that stirs the drink on the offensive end. We've talked repeatedly and will continue to, because he's that good, about Jaren Jackson Jr. as a defender. When they are both dominating on the offensive side of things, the Grizzlies are borderline unbeatable, Damichael.
They're tough. I mean, there's so many ways we can hit this show. You mentioned the first time that both of these guys top 30 points in the same game. This is the first time Jaren Jackson Jr. specifically has scored 30 points in a game. July 31st, 2020. You remember that?
Wow.
You remember when that was? That was during the bubble. That was
2 years ago, really, but or over 2 years ago now. Good Lord, it feels like 10.
2.5 years ago almost. It was during the bubble. And that was the last time Jaren Jackson Jr. topped 30 points. So it's been over a couple seasons here. And quite frankly, we've had these questions, right, about the Ja and Jaren pairing. Not in totality, I don't think. I think, it makes perfect sense that it could eventually work out, is what people probably were thinking before this season, before last season, because you have a stretch big and you have one of the most dominant paint scorers, in the NBA from the point guard position. It makes perfect sense for it to work out. But as we saw the two playing together, you realized, wait, Jaren is best when he has the ball in his hands. This guy is not a guy that you can just stick on the perimeter and shoot the basketball. He's not a great, rolling to the rim big where he grabs the ball and becomes super explosive like a Amari Stoudemire or something that.
He's worse than not great. He's actually one of the worst role bigs in the entire NBA.
And there you have it. From the man Joe himself. He's one of the worst role bigs in the NBA. So that's not his game. And it took some time. It's still taking some time. I remember in the offseason, Ja Morant was super excited about the offseason, Joe, because he felt this was the offseason that he and Jaren could kind of figure that out, that they could work well together. And in the past, if you look at the numbers before, this season, Jaren Jackson Jr., his numbers when Ja go off the floor were much better because that's when he got the ball in his hands. If you remember the Golden State playoff series, right? Jaren struggled a little bit early on in that series. When did he have his best games? Right after Ja Morant got hurt. So it kind of makes sense overall. But the Grizzlies, it's Taylor Jenkins' job to work through that, to work that out. And what we saw in this game? We saw them work it out. And Jaren got his post touches, and that's where he kind of did a lot of his work. Only 2 of 3 on 3-pointers, but he took 14 shots, 12 or 14 from the field. So he was aggressive. He was ducking down in the paint. I pointed out specifically in my story, Joe, about the sequence when the Grizzlies were up. I think it was 116-108. With 3:03 left in the fourth quarter, the Magic made the run. That was the first time the Magic were within single digits since midway through the second quarter. And who did Taylor Jenkins draw the play up for? It wasn't for Ja. They came out of the timeout. He cleared the side of the court off, got the ball to Jaren Jackson Jr. Everybody else moved out of the way, 2 points. They believe in him now. They've made it a focal point to get him the ball more. And now we're seeing the results. And quite frankly, Joe, that might be the key to making this duo, to get the best out of this duo. And mind you, Desmond Bane didn't play yesterday.
No, he did not play. And that's pretty remarkable when you think about it, that they were that offensively effective without one of their more important offensive weapons. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a physical freak like Ja Morant is, just in a very different way. Ja obviously is one of the most athletic players, if not the most athletic player in the NBA. Extremely fast with the ball in his hands. Jaren is 6'11", 240-some pounds, and he moves like a gazelle. He's extremely long. He's extremely lean, and he's quick. He's starting to understand how big he is, Damichael, and I think that is where that room for growth is so exciting because he is not very good as a role big. Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, you can make a bunch of arguments statistically that both of those guys are better at it than Jaren is. But Jaren, again, maybe not bigger than Steve-O. He's definitely bigger than Clark. So if Jaren can ever get to the point where he's a solid or better screener, where he can get to the basket, and even if it's not a full role, but it's something where he's not just setting that ghost screen where he gets out of there real quick, or he's flaring out on top like a pick and pop. It's just further evidence that this team, both of these guys that we're talking about, Morant and Jackson Jr., are 23 years old, Damichael. They have so much more room to grow. That is something to be excited about.
It's the thing to be excited about. I talked about it after the game. This was one of those narrative storytelling type games too, because you're playing.
And I love those.
Yeah. Don't we all? Because this is the thing. This is the narrative that I kind of came away with from this game, Joe. Because the Magic aren't a great team. This isn't some they just beat one of the best teams in the NBA and one of those simple stories. There was a deeper kind of metaphor with this game. Banchero in the third quarter, 20 points. He went off. Franz Wagner in the fourth quarter, he went off. That duo plus the Markelle Fultz, the Jalen Suggs, once Cole Anthony, once those guys are all healthy, Bol, etc., they're going to have a nice young core going on. But you know what? Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zaire Williams in this game, and Desmond Bane was out. I think it kind of showed, all right, look, you're an up-and-coming young core. You will eventually get there, But this is what one of the top young cores in the NBA looks like right now.
Yeah, it's not really a contest at the moment, obviously. And I do think Orlando's going to get it right. I liked watching them play. Banchero's a dude. Like, that guy can play.
And Wagner.
Both microwave type scorers, extremely impressive. I enjoyed watching them, and I do think the Magic will be good in the future, but it's not their time yet. It's looking more and more like it might be the time of the Grizzlies, though, and we'll talk about that more here next on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 depends on the team members that you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs can help you quickly attract qualified candidates for your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified internal candidates. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications all in one platform. Everybody is talking about goals and achieving them in 2023. The right team member can help you do just that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in getting quality hires against leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Some other guys looked good against the Magic and will also help with that whole championship ceiling thing. We'll talk about them next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by the co-host of Locked On Grizzlies, Damichael Cole. Very excited that he and I are back together. I left off the compliments earlier, Damichael. You look very nice. I mentioned the hoodie, but the haircut and the shoes, you got a couple pairs back there. It's just fantastic. The whole thing's working. Well done, Damichael. Very happy for you and your general existence. I think that the Grizzlies are happy about their existence after a tough stretch there in December. And I say tough stretch, they went like 1-4, and that's not ideal. But they have kind of combined the fact that they're looking at two situations where they were not so good, but they had a win streak before that, and now they're kind of streaking again. One of the main reasons for that is the development and continued growth of guys like Zaire Williams, who you on Locked On Grizzlies, to your credit,
right here.
Give you credit for this. You talked about a conversation with Zaire when you were on your last West Coast swing and how he said, I just need shots to go down. I'm not really worried about it. I feel great. Once the shots go down, everything's going to hit and be the way it's supposed to be. I think he was 6 for 7 against the Magic. Is that good? I feel like the shots
went down, Joe. The shots went down.
So to me, again, we've talked about this before, and in the previous segment, we alluded to the idea of a championship ceiling. If the Grizzlies are truly going to be a championship contender, they're back at the top of the Western Conference, at least for now, right? The Western Conference is crazy, parity-ridden. But as of this moment, the Grizzlies are at the top of the West. So for them to stay there, they have to continue to see development from guys like Zaire beyond Ja and Jaren making their own personal history, hopefully the first of several, if not many, times they each score 30 or more in a game. I thought that seeing Zaire be active, fluid within the offense, comfortable, it seems like he's getting his groove back. And not only does that make you feel good about Zaire's prospects, obviously once Desmond Bane is back fully in the swing of things, you can expect him to do the same, and then these Grizzlies may really go on a run.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it for a while with Zaire, man. People I saw, just even recently, I think there were a couple comments in the Locked On Grizzlies section yesterday alluding to maybe, Zaire going to get some minutes with the G League hustle and things like that. And I get it. I get why that conversation was being had. You look at his numbers. Yeah, he should definitely go to the G League and get some, developmental time there. But the numbers, the mind, two different things, two completely different things. And like I said, talking to him, the numbers didn't reflect the confidence level of the player. And so that makes you think, it's only a matter of time. And boom, 16 points, season high so far, well above his previous high of 11 points he had against the Bucks. So I think that was a big light bulb game from him. Three-pointers to go down. He ran the floor, got a nice pass from Dylan Brooks, kind of on one of those cuts that he likes to do to the basket as well. Just the full package was on the offensive end there for Zaire Williams. I don't think, it was more of kind of like a statement game for him. Remember the last game, Zaire Williams wasn't in the rotation against Charlotte. He wasn't in the rotation, Joe. David Roddy had kind of taken his minutes. John Conchar was the guy who moved up into the starting lineup as well. So those two guys, kind of ate up his minutes. But now with Desmond Bane, being out from the return, the return from injury management that the Grizzlies call it, they gave him an opportunity. And you know what? Now the Grizzlies are going to have a decision to make, because the way Zaire Williams just played, it's going to be kind of hard to go sit him back down and say, all right, you're back out of the rotation after having a game like that. Because when you've talked about it, I've talked about it. Talent-wise, he belongs. But you know why that decision is going to be tough? David Roddy, another good game, solid game for him. He had 8 points. John Conchar, statistically speaking, didn't do anything great, but like I know, that's Taylor Jenkins' guy. So he's not going to be the guy that gets moved out of there. So it'll be interesting to see how the Grizzlies handle that. But overall, it was a great day just from that second unit. That's also something I want to point out. Tyus Jones had 12 points. 8 assists. We mentioned the 16 from Zaire. You got 8 from D-Rod as well, but Xavier Tillman's kind of filled in for Brandon Clark over these past couple games. 6 points for X, 8 boards. Remember, we were trying to figure out, Joe, what does he bring to the table? Well, what I'm seeing right now is physicality from X. He's been forceful. He's using that floater around that inside the free throw line, and he's kind of making that his go-to shot right now. And right now, he's giving the Grizzlies an opportunity where they can still be efficient with Brandon Clark off of the floor. Brandon Clark, just in case anyone was wondering, he is day-to-day right now, so I don't think there's anything long-term there. So he'll be back soon. But right now, the Grizzlies bench is getting it done, and it all goes back to what you mentioned, just the ceiling of this team. And a guy like Zaire Williams, a guy like David Roddy, Tyus Jones being effective off the bench, all those guys kind of point to this ceiling of this team being higher.
Tyus Jones and Brandon Clark when he's not injured, and they don't play again until Sunday, I believe. So they have a couple of days here where maybe he'll be off the injury report when it comes out on Saturday evening. I think that the biggest interesting piece of it is the fact that they're also young, right? Obviously, Tyus is a young veteran, but he's still technically young in the NBA, despite the fact he's played so many years. You look at Zaire Williams, I believe, is 21 years old. David Roddy is in his early 20s. You have multiple guys that they're going to be counting on in this playoff rotation that are so young in the playoffs to arrive. And that's assuming that they don't make a consolidation. I can't say it. I told myself I wasn't going to do it.
Uh-oh.
He
can't help himself. He can't help himself.
I can't do it. I can't talk about exchanges of talent. I promise I wouldn't do it. But they're not going to do that, as I've talked about multiple times. So I think finding, and in competition, iron sharpening iron, the old quote that all coaches like to talk about. I think that's fairly true in this circumstance. You have a lot of young players that want to be a part of a great team. The Grizzlies have the potential to be a great team if they're not already a great team. They're a very good team at the very least. And they see that and they want to take advantage of it. They got a lot of young, hungry guys, and there's only going to be so many spots in the rotation. Hopefully that inspires that competition that all coaches want to see.
It will. You look at, what they have is a good problem. When you have all these guys who can be impactful, and I keep pointing back to, David Roddy and Zaire Williams, but you can also go to, John Conchar, 3 points, 7 assists, only 1 of 4 shooting, in this game. And he was -1. So I don't think he had a good night, overall as compared to the other two guys that I mentioned in Zaire and D-Rod. But Taylor Jenkins likes him. Taylor Jenkins likes what he brings to the table. So I don't think his position at this point is in jeopardy. But if you go back to right before Zaire Williams got hurt with the right knee soreness recently when he missed a couple games, Zaire Williams had jumped up to the early part of, in front of John Conchar in the rotation, and John Conchar started to come in the second quarter, which is now when David Roddy is entering the game. So I believe, the overall goal, the overall idea is to have Ziaire Williams in front of John Conchar because he brings more to the table, like we talked about the talent, right? And it'll eventually be John Conchar or David Roddy in that whole conversation. And, the advanced stats, show that John Conchar is probably a better option right now. Our eye test may say David Roddy is the better option right now. So you weigh all those things and you figure it all out. But it's a great problem to have because at the end of the day, injuries are a part of the game. And when a guy like Desmond Bane wants to rest his big toe, you're in good shape and you can still, beat the Magic on the second night of a back-to-back.
No disrespect to all the guys that you just mentioned, except for Desmond Bane, maybe, but with the injury, probably not. None of them are going to be at the All-Star game in Utah here in a month or so. John Morant likely will be, but maybe not in the way that we expect him to be. We'll talk about that as we got some All-Star vote results here as we wrap up Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there. Football, basketball, soccer, literally all sports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. They are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, not just from the website, but also sports podcasts like this one. The fastest and easiest way is to get to BetOnline.net today. Use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. We will finish up talking about All-Star ballots and where John Morant currently stands next on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by Damichael Cole, and we are excited to finish up today's episode looking at All-Star voting. And they changed All-Star voting this year, Damichael, because you can no longer do it on Twitter. You do it through the NBA.com website. And I do think that's part of the reason for this. But I do want to point out you have LeBron James being the leading vote getter, which surprises no one because he's LeBron James. Kevin Durant is the only other one that has over 3 million votes. Giannis is close. He's just under 3 million. But John Morant only has 915,000 votes. Now, I say only because here are some of the guys that have more than him currently in terms of the vote count that was released on Thursday. Paul George, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. You have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of OKC, who's in the exact same kind of ballpark. He has 911,000 votes. And Steph Curry and Luka Doncic are in front of Ja in terms of the voting. So fan vote helps determine the All-Star starters. And it looks like Ja Morant, perhaps, he's getting lapped right now by both Luka and Steph. Obviously, Steph Curry coming back from injury. Maybe he doesn't make it back in the next couple of weeks, and that opens the door for Ja. You don't want to wish an injury on anybody. So you hope all these guys are healthy and able to go. Ja Morant being as low in the voting as he is, did that surprise you, Damichael? Because it kind of surprised me when I saw these results.
It didn't. It didn't surprise me as much. I will say the gap was substantial.
It's a massive gap.
But I knew the top two would be. Luka's having an incredible year, and you mentioned, Steph Curry. We know the Golden State effect. Golden State is not only one of the biggest brands in America. Golden State is one of the biggest international brands. There he is.
If I could interject for a moment, because I have it in front of me here.
Go ahead.
To your point, I'm adding to your point. Mm-hmm. Steph Curry, right? Mm-hmm. Andrew Wiggins, back in the top 5 in the front court. Yep. Draymond Green, who shouldn't be there. And
Klay Thompson.
Klay Thompson is there among the guards. But Jordan the one Poole. That made me laugh the most, Jordan Poole. But you're leaving off number 10 in the front court for the Western Conference. Kevon Looney, who has more votes than I would say at this point, I don't want to speak for you, my choice for Rookie of the Year, Paolo Banchero out east. Looney has more votes than Banchero does. which is just hilarious.
If we're just talking basketballs,
It's not even close.
Steven Adams deserves more votes than Kevon Looney. If we're just talking basketball,
right?
I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr. not being listed on the front court is a whole nother conversation that'll eventually be had. But all of this is noteworthy. The Golden State effect is like you said, it's present, and people may be wondering, okay, how this voting works. So I'll break it down a little bit. This is fan voting that me and Joe are talking about right now. Fan voting counts for 50% of the vote. NBA players will receive a ballot. They account for 25% of the vote. A media panel, which this is my first year being a part of the media panel.
Ooh,
and
big time.
Before we get to it, when ballots are closed, Locked On Grizzlies will be where I will announce my all-star picks. So you'll get it here first on Locked On Grizzlies. But anyways, 25%, the media panel is the other 25%. So think back to last season, right? Andrew Wiggins was voted an all-star starter, and no one thought, he should be an all-star starter.
Epic.
He had such a huge lead, in the fan voting. And who was the overseas pop star? I think he's like a K-pop star. You may know his name. No,
I don't.
Yeah, but there was, someone on here will know his name. He was an overseas pop star. Really,
help us in the comments with that name.
Yeah, he's a K-pop guy, and he was so big when he tweeted. And I think this kind of played into that rule we talked about earlier where tweets don't count anymore. When he tweeted Andrew Wiggins' name and put the NBA All-Star hashtag, it went ballistic. And that was a big reason because the retweets counted for votes. It went ballistic. But fans, Locked On Grizzlies fans, you might be wondering, okay, how can you help Ja Morant? How can you help Jaren Jackson Jr.? I just mentioned Jaren Jackson Jr. is not even in the top 10 in the front court. So Grizzlies fans, if you believe Jaren Jackson Jr., which I think a lot of you do, at least deserve some type of recognition, you got to do your job. You got to do your job. And it's tough because you're going against these big markets as we see, LA, Brooklyn, and
it's a California thing.
Yeah, California.
You got LeBron, you've got Anthony Davis,
all
the
top
Paul George.
Yeah.
You've got Kawhi. And then you've got Clay, you mentioned earlier, Russell Westbrook, which is funny. He is having a better year than I think most people expected.
But not an all-star year.
Austin Reeves, who's in front of Jordan Poole, also hilarious. So I know California has more physical people, but I feel like we could do better, Memphis.
And this is how you do it. We're going to tell you on Locked On Grizzlies. So there will be 4 days where they're called 3-for-1 days, where one vote counts for 3 votes. You go over to NBA app, NBA.com to submit your ballot. Today is one of those days, January 6th. So if you vote whoever you feel, even if it's someone that's not on the Grizzlies, if you want to be this fair, unbiased Grizzlies fan, but if you feel like Ja Morant at 900, 950,000 or so votes deserves more votes, which, if I'm being honest, I think he does. You can go over right now, January 6th, and then you can do it on January 13th, a week from now, then January 16th, and then January 20th. All of those will be the 4 3-for-1 days where voting will be triple. Today, January 6th, January 13th, January 16th, and January 20th.
So a few Fridays in there, I believe, and then I think the 16th is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which obviously, outside of Christmas, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is probably the second biggest day of the NBA schedule. And I think most folks in Memphis would argue the most important day of the NBA schedule is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So that makes sense in terms of when the eyes might be biggest on the product. Ja Morant should be in the million vote category. And I do think that it's going to be tough sledding in the Western Conference. Steph Curry and Luka Doncic will probably be the starters this time around. Ja Morant will almost certainly be a reserve, but you want to build up the votes. You want to show that Memphis has some of the better players in the league. Ja being on the list is great. No Jaren Jackson Jr., no Desmond Bane. Hopefully that can change. So go out there and get triple votes in today. And we'll remind you as we go through the next couple of weeks here, those other days as they come up with episodes of our show Go vote for Ja, Jaren, Desmond, anybody else on the Grizzlies that you think that deserves it. And then Damichael mentioned that he has an official All-Star ballot vote that he's going to reveal here on Locked On Grizzlies when the time comes. Very excited for that. I, too, will be putting together a ballot. It is not official. Nobody actually cares on my end. But just for the sake of the show.
Care, Joe. I care about
just for the sake of the show. And for a few of you that listen, which I appreciate, or view, I will put the list together for you, and we'll have a good conversation about it on a future episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Speaking of Locked On Grizzlies, thanks for making us your first listen today. Now go make your second listen game-to-game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game-to-Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game-to-Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. The next time we'll be together, Damichael, will be Monday. It's a weekend coming up for us here, and the Grizzlies have a couple of days off. But we'll be talking the week ahead. I know they have a long road trip coming up here in the next couple of weeks that you'll be embarking on as well, which will be fun. But my big thing that I'm looking for from Memphis going into our next episode is how they continue to manage the injury of Desmond Bane, right? Because if I recall correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that Taylor Jenkins had said something like, this is only going to be a one-time thing, doing the rest with Desmond Bane on a back-to-back. And then subsequently they do it, and Bane takes another break. So how cautious are they being? We know that they're very cautious. That's likely what it is. But just continuing to see, again, a couple of days off, there shouldn't be too many surprises on the injury list, although Ja was favoring his hip a little bit. He finished the game, obviously. But just how those injuries and the return to play, because, again, in the Western Conference, a winning streak can lock you into the 1 seed. A losing streak can put you into the play-in. They need to keep racking up these wins, and they can't really afford to keep resting these dudes, although Thursday night's result kind of speaks to the contrary, I suppose.
Yeah, there's Thursday night result. No Desmond Bane, no Brandon Clark. Grizzlies get it done, and they're getting healthier. I think the injury problems that they're having now are nothing compared to what we saw.
No, that's a fact. You're right.
I mean, Brandon Clark, this is some soreness that's day to day. With Desmond Bane, I think they're just playing the long game, kind of how they did with Jaren Jackson Jr. You remember there were a couple back-to-backs where they kind of took their time with him as well. So I think that's all it is there. And, there were some big stretches coming up, right? That 5-game West Coast trip in the middle of January where you got the MLK game against the Suns. But that West Coast trip, you're talking – I believe it's Lakers, it's Kings, it's Golden State, it's Phoenix and Minnesota. There's no break in there. Karl-Anthony Towns will be back by then. So there's no break within that stretch. But the Grizzlies need to be playing their best basketball. And right now, quite frankly, the defense has been playing great. The offense has been humming along as well. And individual players have kind of had great moments. And now when they piece it all together, you'll see what this team could potentially look like at its peak.
Very exciting stuff. All the more reason to stick with us here at Locked On Grizzlies. Rate, review, subscribe, like, comment, wherever you're checking out the show, whether it's on YouTube. Thank you so much. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing, things we can do better. All that would be much appreciated. Same thing on all the different podcast channels. Continue to make us a piece of your NBA media consumption. It is much appreciated. And obviously the Memphis Grizzlies are one of the more fun and interesting teams in the NBA. So make us part of your podcast rotation. Just check in every once in a while, or every day, preferably, to see how things are going in Memphis with the Grizzlies. For Damichael Cole, my wonderful co-host, have a great weekend. I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. This is Locked On.